If you're 30, flirty, and unhappy, join the crowd. A new study shows you're not alone. In fact, compared to 30-year-olds in the 70s, people are unhappier. In fact, not just 30-year-olds, people all the way up to the age of 96, just not as happy as they were in the 70s. Dr. Jean Twenge is a professor of psychology at San Diego State University, the author of this book, Generation Me, and the lead author on a paper publishing all this data that shows Americans older than 30, Jean, simply aren't as happy as they were in the 70s. Wait, was it because the 70s were so groovy?
I don't think so. There was a little bit of a decline in happiness between the 70s and the 90s, but the real decline in happiness for adults older than 30 happened just since 2000, so in the last 15 years.
To what do you attribute the decline?
Well, that's always the question. So we have a couple of theories. One is the growth of income inequality, with the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, especially once people get to 30 and are into adulthood. They're realizing that they might not make it because that's a more and more common occurrence. And when people are young, that's not as much of a problem. There's also a big increase in individualism in our culture that focuses more on the self and less on community and relationships and so on. And when you're young, focusing on yourself and having lots of relationships that may not be particularly deep is fun and exciting. But once you're over 30, most people want to settle into a relationship, have that sense of community, they start having children. So our current culture provides more of the things that make young people happy and fewer of the things that make people over age 30 happy.
And single parents are even less happy than single parents were in the 70s. Are there more? You would think that with the growth of being an individual, with less societal pressure to stay married, being a single parent would become more the social norm and people could be happier being single parents.
So we actually didn't look at single parents over time. It's just an overall result that, as you might expect, folks who are single parents are pretty overwhelmed and thus they're less happy on average, and that's been true for a while.
Okay, the other thing that I want to ask you about is in 2011 there was a big study that focused on happiness and the role of contentment. Basically, that the key to happiness was being content. And that the key to contentment is enjoying life the way it is rather than the way you think life should be, that comparing yourself to your neighbors leads to discontentment, leads to unhappiness. And now with Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat, with social media, we're not just comparing ourselves to our neighbors, we're comparing ourselves to our cousins, to our high school classmates, to people around the globe. How can you be content if you see around you all the time people getting promoted, buying new houses, buying new cars?
Right, and that's one of the biggest issues, is our expectations are so much higher now. So especially young people, they expect to be rich and famous, or just to get a lot of education and a really good job. They expect that much more now than in the 70s. Some of these same data sets show that. Then there's the social media aspect of it as well, that we can compare ourselves to people so often and see what other people have. And other things like TV and movies also put across all of these things that seem just out of reach. If we just had a little bit more money, maybe we could afford all of those things that we see.
All right, since you're a psychologist, I have to ask you then, what's your advice for being happier?
So some of it is, yes, to think about all of the things that you do have, to be grateful for what you have and the relationships that you have. So the advice that's often given is, for example, you can write a gratitude letter to someone who helped you in the past. You can also practice optimism and think about how the future is going to be good. But of course, not too good, because then we'll become discontented.
You know what? I just say stop being so soft. It's not the Great Depression. We could be all out trudging through the Dust Bowl and trying to get to California on Route 66. You know what I'm saying?
It could be worse.
Dr. Jean Twenge, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.